Monsieur le Premier ministre, permettez-moi de vous souhaiter la bienvenue à Davos au nom de tous les participants et du World Economic Forum. C'est en effet la première fois qu'un Premier ministre français en exercice vient à Davos et nous en sommes très honorés. Votre brillant parcours, Monsieur le Premier ministre, votre brillant parcours politique vous a amené à la tête du gouvernement du président Sarkozy.
Road and career in politics has led you to the head of Mr. Sarkozy's government, and your determination to accomplish the objectives agreed on at the election of President Sarkozy are a real opening to world, its modernity, and the challenges which this brings with it. Each and every one of us welcomes you, your popularity and your style. Once you were appointed Prime Minister, you constituted a government which goes under the symbol of openness, with a clear objective to bring about reforms which are necessary in France. France this year, our host during the gala evening, France is on the move.
France is back.
France is back. Mr. Prime Minister, I have the tremendous pleasure of giving you the floor, sir.
Monsieur le professeur, mesdames et messieurs,
Mr. Schwab, ladies and gentlemen, France is on the move. I don't think one could better describe what has been happening in France in the last 8 months. And in fact, as you have just said, it's the first time that a head of the French government has come to Davos for the World Economic Forum. The fact that I'm here today is a symbol. It is the symbol of France that wants to speak with everyone, the symbol of France which wants to participate in all the international fora, the symbol of France that wants to regain its rightful place in the midst of the major debates about the future of the world economy. All the more so that this future does not go without saying. There are many questions about the way in which the globalized economy functions, the crisis of the subprime, the serious plunge taken by the stock markets at the beginning of the week weigh heavily on the growth of the world economy and undermine confidence. So there's an urgent need to re-establish this trust. How can we do this? First of all, by shedding complete light on the exposure to subprimes by the financial actors, then by strengthening the coordination between the regulatory authorities. This crisis, in fact, does raise the question of the regulation of financial markets. Freedom without regulation equals chaos. And chaos, in whichever way you look at it, is not freedom. President Sarkozy, Angela Merkel, and Gordon Brown had already last autumn come up with proposals aiming at an improvement of this regulation, and I believe that it is high time that specific measures be taken. It is true that Europe is in a different economic situation compared with the United States. The fundamentals of the European economy are, on the whole, very sound, and this is particularly true in France. Our households have a very low rate of debt, the corporate results and profits are good, real estate is robust, and the labor market is in good shape. But France, of course, is not a country which is isolated, and this unfortunate economic passage obliges us more than ever before to undertake the structural reforms in France which we need. I love my country, and as all Frenchmen, I don't like it when it is criticized, when she is criticized. When I read in October 2006 a portrait of France which was written by The Economist, I promised that I'd do everything to reestablish this image. What does this British and nonetheless venerable magazines say,
"The sick man of Europe appears beset now by political and economic instability and by civil unrest and disorder. Alarmist talk about France has become commonplace. Homegrown titles such as France in Freefall, Gallic Illusion, and France Malheur crowd the bookshelves. Déclinisme has become a school of thought. Pessimism prevails." Eh bien, si je rappelle les termes peu flatteurs.
Well, if I quote this hardly flattering way in which the international press describes my country, then it is not to simply feed this caricature, but these are cliches about France which are simply part of the past today. The first preconceived idea about France is its supposedly chronic depression. France is chronically depressed. Well, that is France of the past. It is true that we are coming out of a long period of immobilism and hesitation. Our country certainly had a very serious crisis of confidence arising from the fact that all the majorities in the last quarter of century failed to hold their promises and feared deep-reaching reform. Well, the election in 2007 swept away this situation, first of all because the French feel reconciled with politics and the political world by thronging in crowds to the urns, and secondly because they have clearly shown that they want to break with the past and adhere to a clearly assumed plan of reform. They have shown that they want to change their mentality. They have elected a team that has refuted all the old ideas which don't sound right. For example, no, the corporate world is not the enemy of the wage earner. No, labor is not alienation, but rather empowering value. No, globalization is not an option, it is a fact. And the symbol of this new state of mind, ladies and gentlemen, is our reform of the special pension schemes, reform from which all governments have beat in retreat. And now, for the very first time, since a very long time, our government did not give in to the strikes which lasted 9 days, and the government's firmness has gone hand in hand with a continuing dialogue with the trade unions. And perhaps more important even than all the other aspects, for the first time 70% of the French support this reform, even though the public transport strikes crippled their movements quite seriously. So this change in mentality is also the result of a political choice made by the President of France, which is a choice in favor of openness, of opening up. The bipartisan confrontation, party against party, made France lose a lot of time. With Nicolas Sarkozy, the government is now open to all the skills and competencies and people who want to cooperate on the left and in the center. For many observers, France is a country that hesitates to see economic reality as it is. Well, that is also the France of the past. Our country is aware of the fact that it's lagging behind and does not conceal this fact. On the whole, we are about 1 growth point behind other countries and have 1 employment point more than other European countries, and this has been the case for a long time. Nicolas Sarkozy and our team has decided to shake up the French economy to enhance labor and work and jobs, merit and risk-taking. We have taken many measures in favor of overtime since we have come to power. We have reduced estate duties and taxes on donations, as well as on wealth tax, by making it possible to reinvest in SMEs. We have promulgated a rule of common sense, which already exists in other countries, like in Germany for a long time, that no one should have to pay more than 50% in income tax than what he or she earns. And this in a country where one of the most polemical economic debates took place in 1913, 1914, when the income tax was introduced. And the French have now understood that it is important for this to be adopted without sound or fury, and to ensure and to understand that the success of some also brings about the success of others. We are preparing a complete revamping of our fiscal system, in particular that of corporate fiscal systems, to make it less complex and less heavy. A committee chaired by Jacques Attali, and in which several people from abroad are also members, such as Mario Monti, have just come up with 316 proposals to lift the restraints that slow down our growth. And in the months to come, we will be implementing the majority of these measures. A third cliché is that France apparently strikes before it negotiates. Here, two things have changed, as is proved by the recent compromise reached by the employers and the trade unions on the reform of the labor market. It is for the very first time since the 60s that the trade unions and the employers have managed to negotiate and to reach an agreement on a modification of the labor contract. In contrast to our old centralizing habits, we have given a precise roadmap to our trade unions with clear deadlines so that the labor market be modernized, and in order to build what we can call a flexurité à la française. The social partners are assuming their responsibilities. An agreement has also been found for a mission statement of upper management in favor of longer probation times and in the area of termination of labor contracts by mutual consent to avoid endless court proceedings. So flexibility is now being used again, whereas in the past this was a taboo, and this was the case less than a year ago. In conclusion of each G8 summit, the word flexibility was always part of the communiqué, but in the French translation, flexibility was translated as reactivation. Flexibility was not a French word, but we are no longer hiding the truth, so that flexibility can now give rise to a healthy debate. As I've said, new negotiations will start with the social partners, and this concerns the representativity of the trade unions and the rules of validation of agreements. It is my ambition that, thanks to a renewal in social dialogue, France fully adopts a culture of consultation and compromise, and this at the grassroots, that is to say, within the enterprises, in proximity to the entrepreneurs and the wage earners. Another cliché. Apparently, France is a country where mass unemployment is inevitable, a fatality, but that is also a fatality of the past. Our rate of unemployment is historically very low today. It is at 7.9% at the level of 1982, but despite this performance, we still come 24th amongst European countries. We have an objective, and we are adopting all the measures to achieve it, and that is 5% of unemployed by 2012. And to better help the job seekers, we have just started to merge the organization that is responsible for paying unemployment benefits and that which is responsible to find jobs for the unemployed. Jobs should pay better than the dole. This is something that we have heard in all of the electoral campaigns of the past 15 years, but this slogan never was turned into reality. But we have now taken action by creating an active solidarity contribution and by starting an active fight against fraud in social benefits. Lastly, we also want to increase the rate of employment of older wage earners. We have a very low rate in France. And of course, older wage earners, many of us are in that category. Anyone who's older than 50 is an old wage earner. And the fact that this rate is so low is one of the reasons for the difficulties that we have in the French economy, both in terms of growth and deficit of social accounts. So our strategy is now starting to bear fruit. In the last 4 quarters, France has been able to create 312,000 jobs in the private sector, and 321,000 new companies were created in 2007. That's up by 18% since 2006. Now, if you were asked to name a country where public expenditure is not very rational or insufficiently so, you would probably come up with France. It is true that whilst France was not very scrupulous in this area in the past, today France is taking this very seriously. We have a very clear objective. We want to end this spiral according to which our public debt has not ceased to rise since 1974. It's since 1974 that France hasn't had a balanced budget. For all the French who are older than 33 years, since this has lasted for 33 years, we wish to bring back balance and equilibrium in the state's finances before the end of the 5-year presidency of Nicolas Sarkozy. And for that, we have decided to freeze state expenditure and subsidies to local and regional authorities. We have decided on a very far-reaching reform of our public service and civil sector by doing away with those organizations which have no usefulness anymore, merging those which are redundant, and by evaluating the costs and effectiveness of our public policies. Ever since France became a modern state after the revolution, our number of civil servants have only increased, have never fallen. Another cliché, well, postcards, cultural heritage, so pictures the little villages, the great century of Louis XIV. Of course, some of this is true and some of it is good, but we refuse to become a museum. We're a real country, and we want to take the turn of becoming an economy of grey matter, of intelligence. We will, without waiting any further, start the reform of our universities so that they become more flexible, and 10 of our French universities should become part of the 100 worldwide best-known universities in the next 5 years. We are going to increase substantially our budget earmarked for higher education, that is, say, 10% every year in the next 5 years. We will multiply by 3 fiscal incentives in favor of research. And please take note that if you set up an establishment in France, you will benefit from a tax credit on corporate profits for all your research and development expenditure, which is 50% in the first 2 years and 30% at cruising speed. We are also going to step up the speed in investments in the in the sectors which are strategically important as far as technology is concerned. We're going to create a very special fiscal status for the young, innovative enterprises. How can one even consider the future if one does not reconcile the economy and the environment, if one cannot understand that sustainable development is not just an option but a vital need? As the author Leopold Senghor said, we do not inherit the earth or the planet from our parents, we borrow it from our children. And here too we went in for a very original exercise given the political habits of France, and this was called Le Grenelle de l'Environnement, the Grenelle of the Environment, in which the state, the local authorities, trade unions and associations work together to define a specific and concrete program putting growth at the service of sustainable development. And then there's France, the country that said no to Europe during the referendum in 2005. We are aware of our responsibility for this impasse in France. So for the last 8 months, we've done everything we can to help Europe escape from this impasse. We have proposed the Lisbon Treaty, which will allow Europe to have the institutions in order to move forward again. When France takes on the presidency of Europe in July, we want to prove that France has returned to Europe and is back for Europe. I would like to end on one last cliché or prejudice. One says of France that it is reticent about the opening of markets and that it looks at globalization as cans. Well, that is an optical illusion. France comes fifth in terms of exporting of goods and third for services. We are the first worldwide tourist destination and we come third for investments from abroad. In fact, the French are not afraid of globalization. They just want to be better prepared for it so that they can act rather than endure it. Like you, we believe that the opening of markets is the key to well-being, prosperity and development. But this does not mean that we should not speak true when the competition is distorted. With our European partners, we want to do more to overcome the trade obstacles, the investment obstacles, against practices that are against the rules of the World Trade Organization and that violate the IP rights. Nor can we ignore, ladies and gentlemen, the tremendous challenges of globalization, especially in the environment and in the social field. We have to define policies that will help the most vulnerable. We have to have policies that are most adapted, like the Trade Adjustment Act in the United States or the European Global Adjustment Fund. Recent developments remind us every day that the financial markets have to be stable, but this stability does not go without saying. With our European partners, with our allies of the G8, together with the international financial institutions, we must increase the transparency of the markets, and we have to guarantee the highest measure of responsibility on part of all those who intervene and act on the financial markets. Christine Lagarde has been able to obtain from her counterparts in Europe that we think about the role of the rating agencies on the development of international rules concerning the liquidity of banks and the strengthening of the IMF's role. We also believe that it is high time that cooperation between the supervisory authorities of the financial markets in Europe be strengthened, and that is the message that President Sarkozy will bring to the meeting of the G8 on the 29th of January this year. Here in Davos, we are not just the observers of globalization that is adorned with all virtues. We need to find equilibrium, and for that we have to reform the multinational and international institutions. France will do everything to ensure that the G8 will soon become a G13, which will welcome in its midst China, Brazil, India, Mexico and South Africa. It will continue to fight in favor of Germany, Japan, Brazil and India becoming permanent members of the Security Council of the United Nations with a better and fairer representation of the African continent. The World Bank, the IMF have to be revamped. Dominique Strauss-Kahn and Robert Zoellick have as a mandate to strengthen the voice of developing countries in exchange for a greater acceptance on part of these countries in favor of greater discipline. Ladies and gentlemen, France is already changing. In 8 months, our government has reformed more than ever any other government in the past. We will strengthen the constant traits of character that we have that makes France France. We will strengthen the belief in the authority of the government, the public service role, the awareness that we can only be ourselves to a certain extent. France is changing, but the French remain faithful to themselves. They remain just as impatient as in the past. They will remain as rebellious as in the past. They always want to push everything as far and as high as possible, and that is the challenge that I have on a daily basis as Prime Minister of France. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I'm sure you've convinced everybody. Of course, there are many heads of enterprises here, and I wonder if there's anybody who, as an entrepreneur, has brought about and achieved so much change in 8 months, particularly that of changing the mindset and the attitudes of those who work in his or her company. It's a wonderful model which you have presented to us. Management of transformation is a real model. And there was another idea which came to me when I was listening to you, Prime Minister. France has given the world the French Revolution, freedom, equality and fraternity. Now, there's going to be a second revolution from France, which could perhaps be characterized by innovation, dynamism and openness. Thank you very much for having come to speak to us, and I take advantage of this opportunity to thank France for their generous hospitality, which we shall all enjoy on Saturday evening, which will indeed be a demonstration of the fact that France is dynamic and that it has a tremendous culinary culture which we shall all enjoy and take advantage of. Thank you very much, sir.